Today I'm going to show you how to make this 4-door glazed kitchen wall unit, and I'm making this for my own doll's house kitchen. The cutting list is in the description box below, and coming up next is a list of the tools and materials you'll need, and then we'll get started. If you've been following my doll's house kitchen furniture tutorials, you'll know that all of the pieces I've made so far I've done in cream with a wood worktop. The wall unit I'm going to do in the wood effect, so I'm going to use the wood dye to colour it. So I've started by cutting the main body of the wall unit, so the back, the top and bottom, the side pieces, the central divide and the shelf pieces, and I'm going to begin by giving them one coat of the light oak wood dye. And again, if you've been following me, you'll know that the colour I've made up consists of 2 coats of light oak with a top coat of dark oak. So I'm just going to give them the undercoat, if you like, and then I'm going to construct the piece, and then I'll apply the next 2 coats. And then I'll do that with all the other pieces as we go along, so the doors and then the top and bottom piece, which we'll finish it off with. So if you want to do the same and you want to use wood dye or varnish for your wall unit, I would advise starting this way. So cut your pieces for the main structure and then apply 1 coat of varnish or 1 coat of wood dye or whatever you're going to use. But if you want to do the 2-tone effect or just paint the piece all in one colour, then you can wait until the construction stage and then paint at the end as we normally would. So I've got here my light oak wood dye, I've got a plastic tray which I stand the pieces on to dry, and I've got my latex gloves just to protect my hands while I'm applying the wood dye. Now if you're using Rustin's wood dye or any sort of wood dye, always make sure you give it a really good shake to start, otherwise the sediment tends to sit at the bottom and you won't get the true colour. So I don't have to keep dipping my brush into the tin, I've dispensed some into a pot here. And you only need a small amount goes a long way, so even there I've probably tipped a little bit too much in, but if I have, I can just cover that with cling film and use it again, so it won't go to waste. And because I'm doing both sides of each piece of wood, that's why I'm wearing the gloves. If I was just doing one side, I would probably make a little tab to go on the back of the piece from masking tape, which I've showed you before, but you just make a little loop and then you can hold it with that while you apply the wood dye or varnish. But like I say, in this case I'm just going to use the gloves to protect my fingers. And I only want a really light coat, and I find that by applying a light coat before construction you don't get that glue residue. Wood dye and varnish doesn't take over glue residue, and sometimes no matter how careful you are with your removing with a cocktail stick or sanding afterwards, you will still get some glue residue showing. That there. And I've got a couple of pieces of kitchen towel torn off ready here that I'm just going to wipe that off with, and that just removes the excess wood dye. And that's practically dry now, but I'm just going to leave it to sort of soak in and really dry over on my tray, and then begin the next piece. And don't leave any other projects on your desk whilst you're doing this, because it does tend to splash a bit, and I've done that before and then found lots of little brown dots on things, and though you can sort of sand them off or paint over them, it is still quite annoying. Once your wood dye or varnish is completely dried, we can start marking up the pieces before construction, and we're going to begin with the top, back and bottom pieces. So just put those side pieces to one side, and we just want to draw a line down the centre of each piece. Just do a little pencil mark at the top and bottom of each piece, and then join those up. Put the ruler just below the pencil marks to allow for the thickness of your ruler, and then when you join them, just go onto the front and back edge of the piece, and that will help when we're placing that central divide. That's that piece. Do the same with the other pieces. Onto the back and front edges again, and the back piece. Turn and join that up, and then with your back piece still on its side like that, we're going to do a line 31mm or 1 7/32 of an inch from what will become this top edge. Now that is just a little bit over half, because then that allows for the thickness of the shelf which will sit above it. So you need to then remember which edge is the top edge for when we begin construction. So you can put a little T on there if you like, or a little arrow going to the top, or however you think you'll remember. And I just sort of keep things the right way up on my desk, so that will go up there like that. And then we're also going to do that line 31mm from the top on the side pieces. So again, I've been keeping my pieces in the correct order here, but if yours have got muddled, you've got two longer pieces which are your shelf pieces, so pop those over there, and then the shorter piece is your central divide, just slightly shorter than those side pieces, so you can pop that over there. So again, we'll need to remember which is the top on these. So 31mm, oops, that's 1 37, start again, 1 7/32 of an inch. And again, do your little pencil line onto the front and back of each side piece, and then place them on your desk, or do the little arrow or whatever to make sure you remember which is the top edge. Same with that piece, do your little line onto each side. And finally we're going to do a pencil line across the central divide, and this time it will be 29.5mm from what will become the top edge, and again that's not quite central, so you'll need to remember which is the top. So you can put a little T on there, and that is 1 5/32 of an inch. So again, do your little pencil lines at either side, join those up, and again go onto the front and back edge. And I only say go onto the front and back edge because it depends which way round you end up gluing it into place, but this way you've got a mark on both sides, so it doesn't matter. Okay, we can now begin construction. Okay, so I've dispensed some glue onto a piece of card, and I'm using a cocktail stick to apply it, and we're going to begin by attaching a side piece to the outer edge of the back piece. So begin by applying glue along the edge of the back piece. And the top and bottom should be lined up, and your pencil line will be as well. Press that into place. Hold on to it for a moment while the glue begins to take, and you may find that having already used the wood dye or even varnish, the glue will take a little bit longer just to sort of grab. You might just need to hold on to that for a little bit longer. I'm just going to press that into place with a piece of strip wood as well, You just find that you can press the pieces together with a little bit more force, and with the strip wood there, you're getting the glue to sort of touch all the way along. Keep that handy. Another cocktail stick to remove the excess glue. Still important to do even though we've given it that first coat, because we don't want the second layer to show up the glue residue. Like that. We're then going to attach the top piece, and that will sit on the inside edge of those joined pieces like that, and again your pencil lines will line up. And I've just noticed that my camera battery is starting to flash red, so that's probably a good place to stop there and go and put a new battery in. Okay, so apply glue to the short edge and the long edge. So that your pencil line is facing inwards. Make sure that's sitting right along the top edge of the back piece, and that you're pushing it right into that corner, and then just use your finger to make sure you're lined up or flush along the back all the way along, like that. Want to be flush along the top of that side piece as well. And because it's quite a long piece, it might feel a little bit flimsy, but just sort of push it into place and hold for a moment. And you can use that strip as well, just to push that all together along that side first. Just push it along the back there, and then you can sort of slide it along and make sure that that's all lined up as well. That corner looks a little bit lower than it should, so I'm just going to pop that up. And you've got time to make these small adjustments as your glue is drying. Just completely pull that out of place there. Okay, so you now want to bring in one of your shelf pieces, and this is going to sit just above that pencil line, like that. And you can use the pencil line on the front of the side piece there to make sure that it's sitting where it should there as well. So apply glue to the shelf piece, a short and a long edge. Press it into place. Try and cover that pencil line, but if you're using a darker varnish it will disappear anyway. I'll get my hand out of the way and just holding it into place. I'm just going to use this, just because the lines are on a darker background, they can be quite difficult to see, so I'm just using this to make sure that the shelf is sitting straight all the way along. I couldn't just quite see that line at the end of the shelf there. And again, this is one of those fairly simple designs. If you wanted to have a shorter shelf or just have sort of like a two-door unit, you would just sort of cut your back piece to that length, adjust your top and bottom pieces as well, or make it longer if you wanted to, so you could have like a triple cupboard, or you could just have cupboards at either end and just have like an open shelf area in the middle. That open shelf area could be narrower. It's such a simple design that you can sort of change it to fit your own style or your own kitchen. So this piece will sit in the middle there. Again, make sure you've got the your little line that you did, or your arrow at the top there, or your little T I meant to say. So begin by applying glue to that edge of the shelf, and I always sort of like to dry fit the pieces first, like I did just there, just to make sure they're exactly the right size. Sometimes when you've applied varnish or wood dye first, you find that it's added to the height or the width of a piece. This is only a thin coat, so I haven't found that so far, but I always just like to dry fit first. Glue that into place along there. You've got your little line again on the front of the divide, which will help you keep that shelf straight. Push it up into that top corner. Again, use the line on the front edge of this top piece to make sure, again, it's sitting straight that way. So doing all these pencil lines at the beginning before you can begin construction can be a little bit tiresome, but it is important because it will just make sure that everything's square, everything's lined up from all angles. So I never mind spending time doing something like that because I know the end piece will be square and straight and you'll get a better result. So don't skimp on your pencil lines. We can now attach the remaining shelf, and again that will sit along that line just above it, and you can use the shelf that's already there to help you line that up, so those two edges should be completely lined up. I just want to have a look from the front to make sure I'm on that line. I actually wasn't. Make sure you're pushing it right into that corner so you've got no daylight coming through there. I'm going to bring that strip in again I'm actually using the strip really like a small set square, just to really line that shelf up. Again, I keep pulling pieces off because I should be allowing it to dry for a little bit longer. If it was just glue onto the natural wood, the glue would be taking a lot quicker. And if you're using like a strip to use as a set square, don't leave it in there too long, as you might find it becomes stuck. I've done that before. We can then attach the bottom piece, and again that will sit on the inside edge there. And just begin by making sure you've got a nice fit everywhere. If it was slightly taller than your divide, you would just sand a bit off the bottom, but just in the one direction along your sandpaper. Try not to rock it back and forth as you'll round off the corners. So begin by applying glue on the bottom edge of that central divide, and then to your shelf so that your pencil line is on the inside. Again, push that into that corner, just using my fingers to make sure I've got a nice flush edge along there. Press it up against the central divide as well. So not long after the camera battery ran out, the memory card also ran out, so I just popped off to download the footage I'd taken so far and realised that I'd made a mistake with the shelves, and I'd actually cut them to the same depth as the side pieces and the internal divide, and of course we need to fit some doors in here. So your cut-in list shows the right size and the construction will be exactly the same. It's just that the shelves don't actually meet the edge of the side as they would have done when I was constructing it earlier. You can still follow what I've done with the smaller shelves, and the cut-in list below is correct with the actual size, but just in case you think, well, how come that looks a little bit different now, that's why. So I quickly just took it all apart, cut the shelves a bit narrower, and then put it all together again. But that's why it looks a little bit different. So I was going to start the video, start recording again from the beginning, start the project again, but I thought I'd just keep what I'd done so far and just tell you what had happened, just because things like that can happen, and sometimes it's at the construction stage that you realise you've made a mistake. And I'm just glad it happened then, before I'd attached this side piece and secured everything with masking tape, because it was a lot easier to take apart before the glue had completely dried. Okay, so once at this stage we just need to attach now the remaining side piece. So apply glue to the edges of the wall shelf. I think my glue might be a little dry. Okay, pop that back down, and then you just want to attach the side piece so that the pencil line is on the inside, and make sure that the shelf there is sitting just above the pencil line. I'm just going to use the jiggle time to make sure that the top and bottom pieces are flush with the top and bottom of the side piece, so you've got a nice square top and bottom edge. Whilst that glue's beginning to take, I'm just going to grab some masking tape. Just stand that up, and I'm going to put a piece right over the side. Put it nice and tightly, like that, and then I'm actually just going to put a couple of pieces right over the back like that. It's actually the back part I want to secure, so I just tuck that in there, pull it nice and tightly over the back of the wall shelf. Like that. And that is the main piece constructed. So that can now be left to dry. Okay, we're now going to drill holes in the top and bottom of the shelf for the doors, for the pin hinges. So I've got my smaller ruler here, just because it's easier to handle, a nice sharp pencil, and you want to make the pencil marks 1.5mm or 1/16 of an inch from the edge of the top piece and back from the front edge. So in from the side and back from the front edge, and you're not including this side piece, you're just making the measurement on the top and bottom pieces. So just start by going from that side edge 1.5mm, and you can just do a little line going backwards, and then turn and do your 1.5mm pencil mark or 1/16 of an inch, and you can make a little dot like that. So you want to do that at each corner on the top and bottom of the piece. So going from that front edge, it doesn't matter which way round you do the line and then the dot, as long as you do both. Like that. And then turn it over and do the same thing again. So I've got my pin drill here, and in there I've attached a 0.75mm drill bit, and that's 1/32 of an inch. And then you just want to drill out each of these holes. So support the unit with your hand, and then just drill gently down. Keep the drill upright. So for the doors, for a change, I'm using a 3x3mm strip wood. That's 1/8 of an inch, and it's just because I want a larger display area. I've got plans for making lots of little jars and tins and boxes to go inside the cupboard, and I want those to be as visible as possible. But for this sort of design you could do a full door if you wanted to. So you would just cut a 3mm thick piece of sheet, 1/8 of an inch sheet wood to that size. So basically, so you've got 2 doors in each bit, so just half the size. You could use a frame and you could use mesh. I'm going to use a glaze. You can use a thicker frame, a 3x6mm strip wood. That's 1/8 of an inch by 1/4 of an inch if you wanted to do that. So really just make sure that the wall cupboard is fitting in with your kitchen and your own design. So change them if you wanted to. You could even maybe have an open door on one side and a full door on the other side maybe. Okay, so the next thing to do is drill the holes in the hinged side of each door. So I've sort of laid them out here how they'll go. So obviously these 2 in this side and these 2 in here. So these outer strips of each one will be the ones we need to drill the holes in. But basically you're taking 4 of the longer strips and we're going to drill holes in the top and bottom of each piece. So I've got my desk vise fitted here, and I always have this piece of kitchen towel in it, and that's just because when you're using a softer wood the edges of the vise can tend to dent the wood, so always just pop that in there. And we want to drill a hole, again the 0.75mm bit, we're using the 0.75mm bit. And we want it to be right in the centre of the top of that strip, on the top and bottom. So make sure that's nice and tight. Now I'm going to do this by eye, but if you would rather measure, then just find your centre, so measure both ways across the top of the strip. And then make a little dot, and then once you've got your centre, position your drill, keep it as upright as you can, and then just slowly drill down. And you want to go down probably about 1/4 of an inch or 6mm. You need to keep it upright so it doesn't sort of split through the wood. Let's just take that out. And then to check that you've actually got a deep enough hole in there, let me just grab my dressmaking pins. Take one of your dressmaking pins and then you can just pop that into the hole, push it down, hold your nail where that sort of meets the strip, take it out, and then you'll know that you've got a deep enough drilled hole there. Okay, so do that top and bottom of each of those 4 pieces. So the 4 that we've just drilled the holes in, I just want to round one long edge of each piece, and that's just so that when they're in place they open and close more smoothly. So we just want to round off 2 long edges along the same side of each strip. So just hold the strip in your hand and have your fine grade sandpaper at a bit of an angle to that corner, and then just sweep it down. And normally I'd do this on a sheet of sandpaper on my desk, but because this is such a small piece you can't sort of hold onto it and sweep it along the paper at the same time, so I'm doing it by hand. And you're really just taking off that corner. And then do that with the adjacent corner. I'll try and show you from the top there. I don't know if you can see that. You've just very slightly rounded off the sharpness, and that will be the piece that goes to the sort of edge, or the outside edge of each door frame. I'll pop that there. So do that with each piece. So as I'm just sitting here rounding off the edges of those door frames, I just realised that I haven't drilled the second lot of holes for this inside door. So we need to do another 4 holes, and it will be again 1.5mm, 1/16 of an inch back from the front of the top piece and 1.5mm in from the inside edge of this divide. So you want to go from that edge of that divide at each side. So 1.5mm from there that way and 1.5mm from there that way. And again, we need to do that at the top and bottom of the piece. So I'll start by doing a line 1.5mm back, and that can go all the way across. And then let me go that way. And then 1.5mm from that inside edge, and do your little dot like that. Just turn it that way to do that side. Again, 1.5mm from the edge of that divide, like that, and then turn it over and do the same thing again. And again, just support the piece with your hand and drill the holes. Okay, so that piece can now just be popped to one side. And then the pieces that you rounded off, you want at the outer edge of each door frame. So position those like that, and you also want the rounded edge on the outside so that it's facing the outside of the door, the bit that will sort of pivot against these edges and the internal divide. And then each door will consist of two of the top and bottom pieces like that, and then the straight strip. So straight strip, top and bottom, and then there's my rounded one for that left hand set of doors, and then same again on that side. So a top and bottom piece, and then the straight strip on the inside edge, and that's how we're going to glue them together. So just begin by applying a little bit of glue at the end of each of those top and bottom pieces. Just work on one door at a time. And then lay that there. Same with the bottom piece. And then just make sure again that you've got the two rounded edges facing outwards, or in this case to the left. And then attach the top piece so it's flush with the top of that strip. Same at the bottom, and we're just really creating the frame, so you want a nice square frame. Can't talk today either. And then bring in your straight edge. And as long as all your sort of top and bottom pieces are flush, you'll have a nice square frame. So just very carefully press all that together. Press it flat against your work surface as well. And then just very carefully slide that to one side to be left to dry. And then move on to your next one. So this one, which is my right hand door of this left hand side, will have the rounded edge over on the right hand side. So again, just make sure your two rounded edges are facing to the right, and then you can do the same thing again. Slide that over there, again to dry, and then do your remaining doors. And again, if you wanted to create a sort of frame in there, like a cross frame, you could just use the 3x3 again and cut those pieces and do it as you're sort of going along. So you'd put you could put this top and bottom piece on, and then put a piece there, and then a central piece, and then another piece, and then attach your remaining side. I've made them like little frames like that before, little window frames almost, and they look really nice. Gives a really nice sort of country kitchen look. When the glue on the door frames has completely dried, and these have been drying now for a good couple of hours, you can just very gently sand them on the front and back. And you just need to hold on to them very gently against your sandpaper and just go round in small circular motions. And I've actually done all of these, but turn them over and do the other side as well. And that will just give you a nice flush front and back. And then what you can do is hold on to the strip at the bottom rather than the frame, and then you just go across the sandpaper like that, and again that will give you a nice flush top and bottom, but just be really gentle because obviously it's quite a fragile structure. And then I think the wooden doorknobs that I've got in my drawer are going to look a little bit too chunky on here, so I'm going to make some doorknobs using a cocktail stick, and I also used this technique in my first book. So begin by snipping the pointed end from a cocktail stick, so you can just roll it along your worktop under your knife blade, and then that will go through. Just get rid of that pointed bit, and then with your sandpaper on there you could just sort of twist it around like that on the paper to round off the corners, or you can do it in your hand with a piece of sort of medium grade sandpaper and just twist the sandpaper around the top there, and you're just really making it into like a little doorknob. Just want to round that off like that, and then holding on to the part that you've just rounded just with your fingernail, you just want to trim that to about 1.5mm or 2mm, so 1/16 of an inch or just over. And I'm holding on to that part because if you do it the other way around, that part will just ping off and you'll never see it again. So again, you can sort of twist the cocktail stick along under the blade. Just be really careful you don't trim your nail off as well. I've done that before. And then snip like that. And then you've just got a tiny little doorknob there. And I'm going to position mine at the bottom for a change. I normally put them in the middle. I'm just going to have them right in that little bottom corner on each door, so I'll just make another 3 of those. And of course you can use sort of pre-made wooden doorknobs if you've got them small enough, depending of course on what type of door you're doing as well. You might have a little tiny bead, or you might want to use maybe a brass handle or something, perhaps something longer that will fit within that 3mm strip. It's entirely up to you, and like I say, depends on the style of your kitchen and what type of doors you're doing. Okay, so I fitted my doorknobs, I'll just show you those there, and I actually glued them into place as I was going along, just so that you don't lose them just because they're so tiny. I really like how they look. With the narrower door frames you don't want them looking too chunky or out of scale. So that's those. And then I just want to grab my dressmaking pins, and I just want to dry fit the doors before I apply the wood dye. That way if there's any little adjustments that need to be made, you can do it before you've applied the wood dye or varnish. So begin by just pushing a pin through the top there, and then you can attach the first door. Let's move over a little bit. So just push the door onto the pin. Like that. Put the door roughly into position, and then you can push a pin up through the bottom. Like that, and that was easy. And then just check that you've got a nice smooth opening there, or that it opens smoothly. That's nice. And then just work your way along. Let's go through the top first. It's a little bit tight at the top there, but I don't always mind that as long as they close. Ouch. And it's always quite tricky getting the hole, getting the pin into the lower hole. So just be patient with it. Move the door around if you need to. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so that one, it's a little bit wider at the top than it is at the bottom, so I'm getting more of a gap here than I am at the top. But what I might do is just sand a little bit off of that inside of the door top there. Otherwise I'm quite happy with that. I'll try the other doors as well. Make sure they're flush against the front of the unit. And that went in nice and easy as well. If it feels like they're a bit tight, just be very, very gentle with them. And I can even actually see why there, because I've rounded off more in the middle and not enough at the top. So just make a mental note to yourself of what you need to do. So I just need to round that one off a little bit more at the top. And doors are quite tricky, you know, so don't be too hard on yourself if you sort of get to this stage and you need to make adjustments, because chances are you will have to. There's only going to be minor adjustments, just to make sure everything's perfect. That one is actually okay, so it's just that one I need to sand a bit off that top inside edge, and this one I need to round at the top. So I'll make those slight adjustments. Okay, so I've made those slight adjustments on each of the doors, and I want to keep them like that on the left and the right so that I know which side they go back on, because that was a nice fit. And now we just need to bevel one long edge and both short edges of each the top and bottom piece. So I've done that piece just to show you what I mean. And then when you're using a longer piece like that, normally I would advise to sweep the piece towards you, but because it's so long, we're going to do it that way around and go across the sandpaper in one direction and just bevel that off. So hold it at a sort of 45-degree angle like that. Let me make myself a bit of room. And then sweep across the sandpaper. Keeping it at that same angle and trying to keep the pressure the same all the way along as well, so you're not pushing down too hard at one end, otherwise it will just bevel off one end more than the other. So you just need to keep going until you've got a nice sharp bevel, and that's just starting to sort of round off now. Like that. And then the sides you can do as you normally would, so just hold the piece at a 45-degree angle and sweep it towards you. Again until you've got a nice sharp even bevel. And then you can just finish that off with a piece of fine grade sandpaper. Make sure you've got nice smooth edges. Like that. And then use that same sandpaper to sand what will be the top edges, so you've got a nice surface for your wood dye or varnish or paint. For my top and bottom pieces, I've made one of my little masking tape handles just to hold it by, and that's just because I want to get around the inside edge of that underside as well, which will be visible once the piece is in place. So that's with those, and then when I come round to doing the doors, I shall just pop on my latex gloves and work my way around. So I'm using my light oak wood dye, and as with the actual unit, I'm going to give each piece 2 coats of this, and then once that's completely dry, I should give all of it a final coat of the dark oak, and then wipe it off with kitchen towel straight away, and that will match the colour then of the worktops that are already in my kitchen. Okay, and I've already given this a good shake, and it's really important that you shake it well. Get the lid off, because again the sediment will sit at the bottom and you won't get the true colour if you don't shake it properly. So that's the 2 light oak base coats now completely dry, so I'm going to apply the final coat, the dark oak, and I want to apply it and wipe it off straight away so that I get that sort of lighter colour from it. So I've got some pieces of kitchen towel here ready, and I'm going to start again with the top and bottom pieces, and I'll just start on the underside there. And this, as you can see, when it goes on, is really dark. So I'll wipe it off. And with the pale undercoat, that gives me the colour that I want. That piece can now be just popped over there on my tray to dry. Whilst the wood dye is drying, I want to cut the acetate for the doors. So I've got here an A4 sheet of acetate, and it's 0.05 millimeters thick. So somebody did ask me about the gauge, but I'm not sure about the gauge, but it is 0.05 millimeters, and I actually sell this in my Etsy shop, so if you're unsure you can just pop over there, and I just sell it in single sheets. And then a good way of actually cutting it is to make yourself a paper template, and you want it to sit just inside the door. So just overlapping each of the door edges by half. And that's the bit that will actually be sticking down. You can see actually through the paper there to see how much of a border there is. But just go to sort of halfway along the depth of each door surround. So your template will be the same for each door. And I'm keeping them laid out there in their pairs. And then bring in your acetate and put your template along 2 straight edges. And I've got a couple of pieces of masking tape here. I'm just going to stick that down, keeping it straight there. Like that, and then this acetate can just be cut with normal scissors, and you just want to cut around the template like that. And then you can remove the template like that, and there's your first piece. And then you can move your template along, so peel up your tape, line it up again with the straight edges, stick that down, that again. To attach the acetate, I'm using Deluxe Materials Glue and Glaze. It's a really great adhesive for this sort of thing. You only need a tiny amount and it doesn't fog or mark the acetate. So it does have a little nozzle for easy application, but the lid of mine is broken, so I've just dispensed some onto a piece of card as usual, and I'm using my cocktail stick to apply it. So you just want to apply it around the inside edge at the back of the door. I just want to dust the acetate off before I attach it, and then just lay it into position just so that it's overlapping the frame opening. Gently press it down. And then that can be left to dry. So anything that sort of seeps onto the frame, just let it dry off, and then when it's completely dry you can just use a cocktail stick just to peel that off, and it comes away really easily. So I'll just pop that on there to dry, and I'm going to try and keep them in order as well. The acetate has now been drying for a good few hours, so I'm now going to fit the doors. So bring in your dressmaking pins and just insert one into each of the drilled holes. And then with a pair of pliers we're going to trim the pin to about 3mm or 1/8 of an inch, and just roughly, you don't need to measure it, but I know that if I sort of put the pliers towards the top of the door and snip, then that leaves about 3mm. Like that. Do that with each of the pins. Okay, and then take your first door and remove the pins again. Just pop them to one side. Bring in your wall shelf piece and put the first pin into the hole at the top, like that. So it's sort of halfway through, and then push it into the hole in the top of your door. But you don't want to push that pin all the way in yet, because once it's all the way in, you'll find that you can't get it out again. So let's just make sure that the door is working smoothly first. And then I'm just holding the door towards the front edge of the shelf, and that actually makes it easier to find the hole at the bottom there with the pin. I should have got hold of that pin first, shouldn't I? I'll pop that down. And you come round that side, make it a bit easier. So I want to put the door so it's flush with the front of the unit. Sort of hold that into place at the top and bottom, and just very carefully push that pin through the bottom shelf, and then I just felt that go in there, but still don't push it all the way in. And then you can actually check that you've got a nice smoothly opening door like that. And I'm just going to put the second door in before I push those pins all the way in. So same thing again, remove the pins first. Put the top pin into place on your wall shelf. Slot the door on, like that. Get hold of the other pin first this time. Line up your door so it's flush at the front of the unit, and then insert that pin. And again, that went straight in, but they don't always. Sometimes you'll find you have to sort of jiggle it about a little bit to get that to go in. And then you can push those pins down once you're really happy with the fit of the doors. That's those first two done. Okay, and then repeat with the remaining two. So now the doors are fitted, we can attach the top and bottom pieces, and I'm going to start by doing the top piece. So apply glue along the top of the wall shelf first, and then we can attach the top piece, and you want the back of the top piece to be flush with the back of the wall shelf, and you can feel along there with your fingers to make sure. And then an even overhang at either side, and that's usually the thickness of that bevel. So that will just be overhanging there. Just manoeuvre it whilst you've got time before the glue begins to take. And then I've got my low tack masking tape here again, and I'm just going to secure that at each end. And this is low tack, so it shouldn't pull off any of the wood dye, but if it does, then we can just touch that in afterwards. That side as well. Nice and tight. And then I want to apply the bottom piece. Oops. Same thing again, so you've got a nice flush edge along the back and an even overhang again at either side. Sorry, I'm just taking that out of shot there. I'm just sort of looking at it from all angles to make sure it's where I want it. Like that. Press that down. I'm going to get rid of that bit of excess glue there. Just tuck that piece of tape over, and I'm going to put a couple of more pieces of tape on. And pull that nice and tight. That side as well. And then I just want to turn that around and put a couple of pieces over the back. Okay, pull that nice and tight. Same that side. And then I'm going to lay it down, and I just want to open the doors, and I'm going to use clamps along that inside edge. One at each end like that, each end of each cupboard. The same along that bottom edge. Oops. Through that one then. Like that. And I'll just see if I can get one in the middle at each edge as well. And it's always important to clamp tops and bottoms to units, otherwise, like I say, you'll get that gap in. So it looks a bit overkill, but always do get on as many clamps as you can fit. And once again, that can be left to dry. Now you may have noticed there, as I was attaching the doors and the top and bottom, that I've still got some uneven patches in the wood dye. What I'm going to do is touch those in, and then I'm going to apply a coat of wax just to the sort of front, top and bottom, and those sides. I don't want to touch the back because that's where I'll eventually be gluing it to the wall, and obviously the glue won't adhere if there's wax on the surface, so I won't touch the back. I will just go over those front edges and see if I can get a better finish. And I'm not too worried about the inside. There was still some glue residue on the inside and the dye didn't take over it, but I'll be filling this cupboard, so hopefully that won't be seen once it's in place. Okay, so I'll leave that to dry. Okay, so the glue had completely dried, so I removed the tape, and luckily it didn't pull off any of the wood dye. I've just been around and touched up the worst patches of the wood dye, and now just to give it a nice rich finish I want to add some clear wax, and I'm actually using this clear shoe polish, but you could also use furniture wax. And I want to be really careful here not to actually get it onto the acetate. So just apply it with kitchen towel and rub it in small circular motion, and you can really sort of see it sinking into the wood as soon as you apply it. I don't know if you can sort of see there where I've been and where I haven't, but it really does add a nice rich finish to the wood and brings out the grain in the wood as well, even when you're using soft wood. Like I said, I'm not going to go onto the back because I want to eventually attach it to my kitchen wall with glue, but I'm not going to do that until I've done the displays inside. So what I'll do in a moment, just because I can't wait to see how it's going to look, is just stick it up with masking tape. Just carefully going along that bevel there at the front. And then I'm just going to really carefully go along the edges of the door frames. I'm just putting the kitchen towel into a bit of a point there. I'm going to open those up. And I'm just going along the front because I don't want to touch the acetate. So once you've been around with your wax, you can just go over with a piece of dry kitchen towel and just buff that off, and that gives it a really nice finish. Okay, so I now want to go and try this in the doll's house, so I'm going to pop a bit of masking tape on the back and we'll go and see how it looks. And there's the wall cupboard in situ, and I haven't actually got my ring light plugged in, so sorry if that's a little bit dark, but that just gives you an idea of what that's going to look like. I think that looks pretty straight looking at it from here. I wanted the top of the unit to be level with the top of the window, which is then level with the top of the back door there, and which will also be level with this door once I've built a surround. I think that looks really nice, and the wood actually looks a lot darker, but that is just because there's a shadow falling across that area. You can see this one actually looks lighter, but it is actually the same colour, as you can see when I pop it into the shadow there. So the wood is all the same colour. Look how lighter that looks when I bring that into the light there, so it just shows you how dark it is in the doll's house kitchen at the moment. And there is the completed piece. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If so, please give the video a thumbs up. and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do, as there's lots more to come. If you'd like to be notified whenever I upload a video, hit the notification bell below. If you enjoy making your own doll's house furniture and miniatures, you might like my books. I've published 4 of them so far, and they're all available to purchase from Amazon. Just search for Julie Warren. And for now, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.